Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. Now, this was one of the biggest box office disasters of all time. It's arguably the reason why studios don't give directors as much free reign as they used to have. And it's a very interesting story. And Michael Cimino is a very interesting director. Coming off of Thunderbolt and Lightfoot with Jeff Bridges and Clint Eastwood, and then The Deer Hunter with Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken, that was one of my favorite films ever. And then the infamous Heaven's Gate with Isabel Hubbard, Chris Christopherson, and Christopher Walken, Jeff Bridges. What went wrong? I think Heaven's Gate is a very overlooked film. Oh, and I forgot John Hurt. But I think Heaven's Gate is a very overlooked film. I understand, the criticisms. I understand at the time, given all the things that happened on set and all the drama and Michael Cimino's craziness, I can get why reviewers and critics were very skeptical about this film. And I think the initial critic reviews definitely did not help. Thankfully, Criterion has released this very, very beautiful set. This is 216 minutes. This is the final cut for Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate. The transfer looks great, although I really wish Criterion's had subtitles for English films. Because some of the stuff in this film is really hard to hear at times, especially whenever they're walking past trains and what have you. But yeah, check this out. This is the best way to watch Heaven's Gate. I'm actually very curious if the original Heaven's Gate Blu-rays or maybe DVDs in the past has the old sepia tone that was added to the film, which also did not help the film. And I'm surprised that was added because the cinematography for Heaven's Gate was beautiful. Fun fact, I actually did not know this, but while I was checking the film out, when Chris Christopherson and Isabel Hubbard are by the lake, I was actually there. I was actually at filming locations for Heaven's Gate, and I didn't even know it. This was 6 years ago whenever I was 19. Yeah, I'm a young buck. And I thought that was so cool. It was one of those moments where I sat down my Coors Light, just stared at my photo, right where they were standing. It was so cool. But let's talk a little bit more about the filming of Heaven's Gate, because everybody, well, I almost said everybody knows what the story is, but Chris Christopherson is a Harvard graduate that relocates to Wyoming and troubles are brewing. If you're familiar with the Johnson County War, I would definitely recommend doing some research on it. I know that's one thing a lot of people probably don't want to do before they watch a movie, but they don't really do much for the backstory of the Johnson County War. Chris Christopherson's kind of just in the middle of it, and you're kind of just thrown in there. But there's more to it than that. There's also, a really good romance between Chris Christopherson and Christopher Walken. Yeah, everybody loves a good trio, right? But I think the heart of this film lies with its perfection. Regardless, I think, of what anybody thinks of Heaven's Gate, the film is beautiful. It's very beautiful to look at, and nothing's out of place, and in a way, nothing really feels unnecessary. Sure, there might be some things that bog down the story, but for the most part, everything's there for a reason. I will give Michael Cimino that. The film itself, I believe, was meant to be made for $7 million. Like I said, after the success of The Deer Hunter, Michael Cimino, a United Artists, took a really big risk on him. And I think the original budget for this film was $7 million. Well, that shot up to almost 500% because the final cost for Heaven's Gate was $44 million, I think around $125 million today. That's more than a lot of films cost today. I do believe in another world the film could have been made for that $7 million. Granted, a lot of things would have been taken out and changed, but I don't think it would have hurt the story because there's not really much story to begin with in the film. I mean, you could argue that Chris Christopherson's, relationship with the other characters such as Isabel Hubbard and Christopher Walken, Jeff Bridges. I mean, yeah, there is a story there. I feel like it could have been elaborated on a little bit more, but for the most part, everything seems in place. He also shot over 1 million foot of film, 200 hours of footage, and actually harmed animals on set. That's a big no-no. When I watched Cannibal Holocaust, that was, like I said, that was a no-no for me. I don't really agree with that. I feel like there's other ways to do it. It definitely adds authenticity, I'm sure, but yeah, you just don't do that. And I believe there was multiple instances where Michael Cimino was, he had the opportunity to be fired, but of course he wrote, he directed the film, and I believe in his contract, all of the extended budget increases did not fall back on him. It was United Artists. And United Artists would eventually pay for this in a very not so good way. It ultimately caused their downfall. And if you look at it like other films like Raging Bull, it's very unfortunate that this film caused that to an extent. I don't really know. You got to look a little bit deeper into it. Actually, a lot of the videos that I've seen for Heaven's Gate are usually around 30 minutes to an hour long, which I understand can be a bit of an investment for people wanting to know more about the film. So I kind of wanted to make a shorter version of it. Not to be lazy or anything. I've been wanting to talk about this film for a while. There's a lot to it. But it's kind of nice to just get into the nitty gritty. And the runtime. The runtime of this film is 3 hours and 37 minutes. The original cut for this film was, I think, 5 hours long, which the studios were furious about. Now, I believe that there's a place for longer films. And I do believe that audiences still love longer films. It definitely has to be something that they're interested in, but thankfully there's this beautiful thing called a miniseries that you can do, or splitting it up into volumes. If you look at Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac, that was split up into 2 volumes, or Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. It works. It's just a little bit more of a risk for marketing purposes, but I understand why it's done. And, you know, with streaming services, and this is why I say that physical media is so important. That's why I feel like physical media is so important, because it gives people an option to watch longer cuts of these films, or director's cuts, or if the filmmaker just wants to have the original cut in general, release it as a miniseries. Miniseries are very successful, and I would even argue that miniseries, I think that's the way to go for longer films, and I've heard a lot of other people say that. It's just the right move, and I wonder if in another world, bringing up another world again, if Heaven's Gate did have that original 5.5 hour long runtime, but was split up into, say, 5 episodic episodes, kind of the same way the Hateful Eight was, but the Hateful Eight actually did have not a limited, but a theatrical run. I feel like that would have sat better with a lot of people, because, you know, films do pretty well at 3 hours long. I mean, if you look at Avatar, even Tar to an extent, which Tar wasn't 3 hours long. I'm just talking about recently, or RRR. People are still invested into this type of thing. It's just, it really is hard to get somebody to sit down and, you know, sit during a whole runtime of 3.5 hours, 4 hours long. I do believe the sweet spot is 3 hours long. That's kind of my sweet spot as well. I can go to 3.5 hours, but I get not everybody is like me. But it does make me wonder what was cut out of Heaven's Gate, because if you take a film, I would almost argue that Michael Cimino probably could have had an 8, 9, 10 hour cut. If he had 200 hours of footage, a 5.5 hour long cut, and it seemed like he struggled getting that cut, I wonder what was cut out, because even though it might have been a very slow film, there could have been some essential stuff in that. I am in no way trying to defend Heaven's Gate, and I'm in no way trying to defend its runtime. I understand that studios have to make money, and fitting in a 5.5 hour long film into the bill, it just doesn't work. It's shorter run times, but I do believe that maybe they should have tried putting it out on TV. I don't know, maybe that was something that Michael Cimino didn't want to do, but ultimately Heaven's Gate was the downfall of Michael Cimino, and I don't believe he had another great film since. But I do believe that Michael Cimino was one of the best directors of the 20th century. I get it, he didn't make many films, and only 3 of his films were arguably good. You could say 2 for people that don't like Heaven's Gate, but there's no doubt that he left a stamp on the cinematic world. Heaven's Gate, I think it should be even reevaluated again, because it premiered at Venice, or re-premiered at Venice a few years back, and it was met to warm reception, and I think rightfully so. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is a film that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. You know, I like to support Criterion, not because, you know, like I want to get them to notice me or anything. It'd be so cool though. But just because Criterion really does a great job with their transfers and their supplements, and you can actually learn something from their releases. Heaven's Gate, definitely check it out, even though it's a damn shame that it didn't get the recognition it deserved when it came out. Anyway, what did you think of Heaven's Gate down in the comments below? If you guys want to support our independent film, Pesadilla, it would really mean the world to us. We are really trying to make this film possible. It's a dream, and yeah, it would just mean the world to us. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit that thumbs up button. I guess it really doesn't matter. Hit the thumbs down button if you want, and I'll see you guys next time.